Hello everyone, Anita here and welcome to another video. At the very beginning of this video, I would really like to thank all of you who watched my last video and subscribed to my channel. The response to the last video was absolutely amazing. The views are just off the chart and the subscriber count went up so quickly. So I welcome everyone who's new. And once again, thank you so much for subscribing. It means a lot. It gives me just this, little bit of boost to make more videos, so I really appreciate it. And let's jump into the painting immediately so I don't bore you guys. I'm working on an A5 illustration, which is I've sketched it out on 300 gram arch paper. It's a hot pressed watercolor paper, so it's very smooth. And I've sketched it out with just regular pencil. Actually, when I say regular, it's kind of a hard pencil. I believe it's an H6 or H5. I'm never sure. And I've attached the paper to my little board with just regular washi tape. And that's because my masking tape was lost in action somewhere around the house. And I couldn't find it in time. So I figured, you know what, this washi tape was sticky enough. And yeah, it stuck pretty well to the board, but in the end it just didn't. It went all over the place and didn't work at all. So I do not recommend using washi tape, especially when you're using, like me of course, when you're using a lot of heat in your painting. So I did a little bit of extra changes to the sketch, and then I'm just working with a very light layer of. It is a mix of yellow ochre and a little bit of just regular yellow. I really wanted to have a very bright, kind of an autumny feel to the top part of the painting. And as I went towards the bottom, I wanted to change it more to an icy feel, as if to represent the frost that just, starts to settle at the bottom of the forest. It's of course not anything realistic. It's just a purely an interpretation, and it's my way to play a little bit with colors and gradients. I've already set in the yellow, and as you can see, the paper is warping like crazy, and that's because the washi tape started releasing from the board. So I moved into the bottom. I'm very gently putting in the blue, and I started actually to form blooms at the bottom of my paper to represent that really frosty, gritty effect. If you've been following me for quite a while, you will know that I have a bit of a love-hate relationship with ultramarine blue, just because I really love my colors to be very flat and controlled, and ultramarine blue is it has a lot of grain to it. It just doesn't want to lay flat. But with time, I have to say, I used to hate it a lot, but with time, I started to sort of embrace it a little bit more. It does not bother me as much as it did before. And I've also started to use it as, for example, here, when I'm painting a bit more wintry themes, because that grittiness really enhances that frosty effect, at least in my eyes. So it was perfect in this case, and I love my ultramarine blue. That pan is almost completely empty right now, despite the fact that, ultramarine blue and me, we have a little bit of a rocky relationship, but I will have to go and buy a new pan because, I can't live without it. And so I'm building up that little kind of gradienty pattern. I've created a few hills, and I'm just adding layer after layer of more concentrated ultramarine blue. And then here at the very bottom, I'm adding a little bit more neutral tone. I'm just adding a little bit of brown to the blue, mixing it together and creating that neutral tone, just to have a darker tone at the very bottom. So the idea is that the blue kind of transitions into the yellow, but I didn't really want to mix them together to create green. And so I relied very heavily on putting in different shades of yellow, putting in different shades of blue, and then trying to layer them slightly on top of each other at that very, very thin strip where they meet. I think I've succeeded. I'm very happy with the result. But yeah, it's constantly for me a bit of a discovery and experimenting, because I really like to use colors that don't mix very well. Or, for example, the color that they create by getting mixed together, I don't like to see it in the painting. So it's an experiment. As you can see here, I'm kind of working on creating depth by putting different colors, just adding different shades of the same yellow. Goodness, I'm getting so stressed because there are so many new people watching. The pressure is on. So I'm basically starting with that same ochre yellow, just a more saturated version of it. And then I'm slowly adding trees to the background, letting them dry, then adding another layer where I'm putting a little bit more of the brown. I don't remember which brown I was using, but I stick to the same brown through the whole painting. I think it was burnt umber. I hope so. But anyway, I'm adding a little bit of that brown into the yellow, mixing it together to create this slightly different shade. And then the more towards the front I go with my painting, the more brown I keep adding, and that creates that depth, really, really easy depth effect, which I really like to use in a lot of my paintings, actually. And the only thing I do differently is that over here, when I'm painting the trees that are in the very front of the painting, I'm stopping a little bit like at the bottom and adding, like feathering it out towards the bottom, because I knew that I wanted to add a little bit of a darker tone to let it blend it nicer with the blue, to make sure that the bottom of those tree trunks are a bit frosty, that they're not as nice and warm and brown and as the yellow, still warm forest at the top of the painting. It's very hard to explain, but basically what's at the bottom of the painting is supposed to be cold, and what's at the top of the painting is supposed to be warm. After I've added all the colors, it seemed to me like it was still a little bit too plain. So to the middle toned trees, I'm adding a little bit of veins, just adding some texture just to make it look a little bit like an actual tree trunk. I used to do that a lot in the past. At some point, I think just because I had the time constraints, I tried to use a bit less detail because I had to paint faster. I just stopped doing that, and honestly, I missed it. I really like that extra detail when you add a bit of fantasy-like wood grain. So I'm pretty much kind of done with the background at this point. And so I've started blocking in some shapes in the, let's say, the foreground, the middle ground. And I've decided that I wanted those bears to be just a different shade of that same neutral gray-brown mixture. That's why the darker bear is so gritty. It's because ultramarine blue really likes to separate in those neutrals that you create with browns and blues. But in this case, I have to say I really like that grittiness, and I've decided to leave it like that. And I've decided to do all the shading on the bears with colored pencils. The reason for that being that it would create that a little bit softer furry effect rather than possibly washed out watercolor. Of course, I'm not sure, but usually when you layer watercolor over watercolor layer, the layers underneath get softer. And I really like that texture that was created so far. So in the meantime, I'm putting in all the basic layers, deciding on the colors for the character. And you probably, if you've been here for longer, you will recognize this character. This is one of the characters that I like the most, to draw the most. and she usually has a cat with her, but in this case she's alone. So this is the wizard's apprentice slash forest doctor, as in this case. And so she has really, really bright orange hair. And she usually, the clothes she wears are usually very deep green, different shades of deep green. However, in this case, I really wanted to pull up that blue from the bottom so that there wouldn't be that really clear line separating the top part of the forest from the bottom part of the forest from the ground. And so I wanted to pull that ultramarine blue onto the character, and so I've decided to make her hood and her robe or dress, shirt, in that very, very deep, nice ultramarine blue color. And of course it plays perfectly against her hair. I absolutely love that composition, color combination, sorry. Here I made a little bit of a mistake. As you can see here, if you really look closely, I put the blue on top of her face. Now I'm not removing it on camera because it took a little bit of a nose to paper action. I had really had to really look closely at what I was doing. But I've managed to lift that color, and then I reapplied one layer of skin color just to kind of blend it together, and so no biggie. When you have a problem when you put watercolor somewhere where you don't want it to be, don't panic. Let it, if you can't dab it away, let it dry. And most of the time you can just lift it. Some colors are of course more staining than the others, but most of the time I don't have a problem lifting my watercolor in those tiny little mistakes. The darker it is, of course, the more difficult it will be. You can make it work for yourself. People say that watercolors are very unforgiving medium. I actually think it's the opposite. I found out that watercolors are, if you know how to work it, it's gonna do whatever you want. And if you make a small mistake, then you just work around it. I've never had a big problem with watercolors before. But then again, I really don't do a traditional watercolor. I kind of really make it work for myself. Okay, so yeah, that was a little bit of a side story there. In the meantime, I've put in all the colors down, and as you can see, I've made her little trousers under her skirts green, just for that. As I've said, she likes to wear green clothes. And then I've combined it with a very dark version of that neutral color, but I've added a little bit of brown to it so that it will be just another version of that same color. I really like to do that. It just ties everything together. So here I remember that I still had some plants to put in, some vegetation, just a few little leafy plants. And I'm not putting too many of them because, as I've said, this forest is supposed to be, a forest in fall, just before winter. There's first frost on the ground, so there wouldn't be too much vegetation. Just a few plants, a few sticks here and there. You might be wondering why I'm putting blue plants, but I just thought, it looked so nice, just that different shade of more concentrate ultramarine blue. And yes, I do have a crush on ultramarine blue. I just love it. Okay, so I figured, it just fit the whole theme. I mean, I am not a realistic painter, so I can make it work for me. So I'm just adding less details to the foreground. Yes. Just adding those sticks, very, very delicate. I didn't want anything to be too overpowering, too sharp. I wanted everything nicely blend together. So I oftentimes don't put only one line, but I will put a very watered down line first, and then I will let it dry and come back again, and then again and again until I get the intensity I want. And the effect is much softer if you just put one line, because that will usually have a bit more of a sharper edge. So as I've promised here, I'm doing all the shading on the bears with the colored pencils. And to be fair, the bears during the whole process were I wasn't thinking about them that much. I was really, really in love with the color combinations and the character in the background, and the bears were just like an extra that I had to, color. Even though at first I was very, 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 interested in finishing them, and somewhere along this way, it's just kind of floated away, that interest. And especially that beard here, it was supposed to be whiskers, like really, really fluffy, mustachy whiskers. It turned out this bear looks like a giant walrus. I'm sorry, but he does. He's still very handsome though, but he looks like a walrus. So I'm adding white details now, and pretty much the whole bear process was just adding lots of tiny little dots here and there and fur, and that was pretty much it. Adding white details was always my favorite moment in the painting, because it makes everything just come together. It adds that little extra detail, the shine. It really brings out the magic in the painting for me. Well, okay then, so it has been requested in the comments that I do a little bit of a real-time peel action over here, and this is really the first time I'm doing something like that, so I'm just hoping that my camera will not fall from the position it's in. And yeah, I'm not gonna be really doing the usual peel because it will just ruin your ears. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm just gonna do it so that you know exactly how it is to peel the masking tape. Now, in this case, of course, we have the washi tape, but I think we can do something with it. I have to do it very gently because the whole table is shaking. So I'm sorry for any shaking. Let's see. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to use my heat gun here, and I'm going to warm up the tape. So be careful for your ears. So that's how I usually peel my tape, but I think it might be, you might be able to hear it a bit better if I just do it like this. I mean, this piece around the painting is supposed to come off anyway. And this is washi tape, not masking tape. Masking tape will definitely pick up some of the paper bits. And there you have it. And here is the finished painting. I hope you liked the little extra peel porn. Simply Nailogical fans unite. I hope you liked that at the end. It's not gonna happen in every single video, but I thought it was interesting. I am so happy with this painting, and I hope you've enjoyed the process as well. If you did, please don't forget to leave a like, and if you would like to see more videos, don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so very much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye!